Okay. So my name is Jasmine. I'm a third-year commerce student at Smith School of Business at Queen's University, and I'm an incoming summer business analyst at McKinsey. So I went through the entire recruiting process last summer. And so my second year internship was in asset management at Burgundy, and I'm also doing health e-commerce entrepreneurship on the side as well. Okay, so today's agenda, mainly wanting to share consulting recruiting and what that exactly looks like. So looking at the consulting recruiting overview, an overview of the different firms and how they evaluate candidates, as well as resources and best practices for anyone who is looking to go through the recruiting process. And then we'll take a look at the actual case interview overview. So what a typical case interview looks like and the different parts of it, and also dive deeper into the different sections that make up a case interview. And lastly, we can wrap it up with next steps and also open the floor to any questions. So this is the general process of consulting recruiting, and it usually takes 3 to 4 months. So you're looking at interview prep, taking up the bulk of the process. This includes networking, their application materials and actually applying, and then your case and behavioral prep. And then is your interviews. So your interviews will consist of your first rounds, second rounds, and usually interviews are spanned over 1 month, and you may be interviewing for multiple different firms as well. So throughout the process, you'll also be engaging in more case and behavioral prep. And then lastly is the feedback component. So looking at strengths to emphasize on and areas of improvement in order to incorporate and apply this feedback back to your next interviews. And obviously the ultimate goal is to get that offer. So like I said, 3 to 4 month process. 那这整个的这个招聘过程，它其实是迭代和互动的，所以如果你想在每一个方面都表现得比较出色的话，就是充分的在每一个环节准备是其实是蛮重要的。And then let's look at kind of the consulting firm landscape. So this is an overview of the major consulting firms. You have MBB, so your top 3 or your main 3, the biggest 3, McKinsey, BCG, and Bain. You also have your non-MBB strategy firms such as Oliver Wyman, Monitor Deloitte, Kearney, and also Accenture. And of course, you have your big 4 accounting firms as well, and they each have their own consulting branches or segments. So you have Deloitte, EY, KPMG, PwC. And these ones are a lot more operations focused than strategy focused. And then you also have your non-Big 4 operations, such as IBM and Capco. And there's also a lot of separate boutique or specialty consulting firms that focus in on a specific industry or a specific technical area. For example, MNP, Level 5 Strategy, and Conrad. 所以就是在选择这些不同公司，你想就面试哪一些公司的时候，主要研究然后 research 的方面是它的这个办公地点，还有它的这个公司规模，然后它人员就是配备的这个模式 staffing model， 还有工作的这个广度和深度，就比如说功能区或者是行业，他们比较专注于哪一些方面，还有公司的这个文化。 那做这些充分的调查，就帮助你自己决定你最想要去的哪一些公司。可是也是在你面试过程当中，你可以一一说出来，就你为什么对这个公司感兴趣，这也是一个就是必备的一个功课吧。And so now let's look at kind of the different firm summaries pertaining to the major firms. And just to note, some of this information is specific to Canada, so just to keep that in mind. But a lot of this information is also, you can also see it across the global kind of offices of these firms as well. So for some of these firms, you can see here that some of them have the accelerated program, whereas the ones in red, they just have the normal recruiting. 那这个 accelerated program 就是在夏季的这个招聘期，所以他们从6月份开始到8月份，这些公司就会开始招聘了。那其他的这些公司，他们是 regular 的，那只会是在 fall term 或者是9月份开始招聘。So for example, Accenture, you have a regional staffing model, and they're actually the largest major consulting firm on a solely headcount basis. And they operate in a number of different tech and strategy practices in Canada. And the format of their interviews are interviewer-led. 就是面试官主导的这个面试。And then Kearney, they have a global staffing model, and they're often thought as a mini Oliver Wyman, which is another consulting firm that we have down here. And they're mostly performing strategy work for mid-sized businesses and operations-focused work for larger clients. And their interview format is interviewee-led, 就面试者主导的这个面试。For Bain, they have a local staffing model, and they are the smallest of the 3 MBB firms, so McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. And they're relatively new to Canada, but they're also doing significant amount of work in mining and also private equity in Canada as well. So their format is interviewee-led. And then BCG, they have a regional staffing model, and these regions are, I believe, by continent, and they're particularly strong in Canada, with Toronto acting as kind of the main global hub for financial institutions, telecom, insurance, and technology work. And the format that they go by is interviewee-led. And then McKinsey, they have a global staffing model in which they really emphasize on, and they're quite strong in Canada, working with a variety of different public, financial institutions, and retail clients. And so they are truly the kind of only global firm out there, just because they do have scale, and they have a lot of different offices across the globe, in which you can actually be staffed on different global projects. And they are interviewer-led. So they're the only interviewer-led company out of MBB. And then monitor Deloitte, they are a local/regional staffing model. And over the past 5 years, they've become increasingly integrated with Deloitte Consulting. And they focus on financial institution work in Toronto a lot of the times. And they are interviewee-led. And lastly, out of the major consulting firms, Oliver Wyman, they have a global staffing model, and they're the largest non-MBB firm. So they have strengths in healthcare, insurance, and the public sector, and they are interviewer-led. Okay. So now let us look at the next slide. So this is the rough consulting recruiting timeline. And this is based on consolidated information from the last 2 years. Of course, these dates change every year. So this is just a rough guideline. You really want to check in on specific firms to see what the new kind of timeline looks like for 2022. But you see that MBB, so Bain, BCG, McKinsey, they usually have accelerated recruiting, which means that they do interviews and their applications open and they do first round interviews starting from May and June. And so first round interviews are usually kind of end of June or maybe early July. And then your acceptance offers are usually done by August. And then you have the rest of the major consulting firms. Some of them don't have accelerated. So most of them will start recruiting, applications open kind of mid to end of August, and then first round interviews are during September, and you'll usually receive your offer by October. So that is what the rough timeline looks like for consulting. And then you can apply through 3 main streams. So obviously there's the company website that is open to whoever wants to apply, but most students will find it successful to apply through their school career portal. So for Queen's University, that's Quest, and I'm sure other universities have their respective school career portals to apply to as well. Another way that you can actually apply is through networking. So you can actually send cold emails or reach out to contacts at the firm that you're interested in, and you can ask them for more information. And usually they'll be happy to send along your resume to the HR person or to the person who's actually in charge of recruiting. So that's another way that you can actually apply as well. Okay, so this is the suggested prep timeline for consulting recruiting. Like I mentioned, it's usually a 3 to 4 month process. And so for your first month, you can still kind of take it slow, but start to do the groundwork or the basic kind of work leading up to actually getting starting on mock cases. So first is understanding the process. So coming to lectures like this one, reading through guides that actually walk you through the entire interview process, such as Case in Point, and learn what's expected at each point of the consulting prep journey. And then also, it's a good idea to start networking at this point as well. So try and make at least one strong connection at each firm that you're interested in recruiting for. Strong connection can just be talk to them, maybe try and aim for at least 2 touch points with them. So it's really helpful to get started early on this networking so that you allow time to build that connection, and then engage in virtual coffee chats and attend these like virtual info sessions of each firm. And also start preparing your application material as well, so that you can get it out of the way and you don't have to worry about it once you actually start doing mock cases. So prepare your resume, your cover letter, and your transcript ahead of time. And then prepare drafts. And it's also a good idea to send them to other people to edit them for you, or have upper years to kind of look through it and help you edit your resumes or cover letters. And by the end of the first month, you should really try and start your first mock case, preferably with an upper year or someone who has already gone through the process, so that you can understand exactly how the case structure works. Your first case will be absolutely horrible for most people, which is fine. You just need to get into it and get it out of the way so that you can start doing other mock cases. And once you actually start doing mock cases, you should aim for 3 to 5 cases per week. And so in the second month, This is when you're really focusing on doing drills and mock cases. So work through the different case books. Again, 3 to 5 full cases per week is a good target that you should be working towards. And work with a range of different people. So peers or people who are also going through the recruiting process, upper years or people who have already gone through the process. You will get really valuable information from these people. And then after you're pretty comfortable with doing some of the cases, you can try reaching out to consultants in the industry or at the firms that you're interested in. Most of them will be happy, especially alumni at these firms will be happy to help you prep for your first round or second round interviews. And then on the behavioral side, you should really start creating your extended resume. So writing out exactly what you're going to say for your tell me about yourself question. This is something that all firms will basically ask you. So you better have kind of a really good and well-prepared answer for tell me about yourself. And also crafting your stories using the STAR or the CARE approach, and developing answers to common kind of behavioral questions. Do a quick search on Google and what are like the most common behavioral questions, and you'll likely be getting if not some, if not all of those questions during your interviews. And then for month 3 and beyond, you should really be applying what you've learned in all your mock cases that you've done with other people to your interviews. And sometimes you won't have time for full cases anymore because you're also doing interviews at the same time. You can just do case starts or drills. So just up to after you finish your structure, you can stop there. You don't have to do full cases anymore if you don't have time to, but then doing drills such as mental math, ideation, exhibit reading, etc. And then always remember to ask for feedback and incorporate them into your next interviews as well. And throughout this whole kind of process, so month 1 to month 3 and beyond, you should also be reading the news, making sure that you're kind of aware of current events so that you can pull from some of those current events in your interviews as well. And then practice consulting communication. So even if you've done an old case, going back to your old cases and practicing again how to clearly communicate your structure or certain parts of that case, just practicing that and visualizing that is going to help you a lot as well. Of course, mental math drills, making sure that you're quick to those calculations, and also maintaining your interests outside of consulting is pretty important as well. Just so that when the interviewer asks you what your other interests are, you can tell them other stuff that you've been doing recently or have been working on. That's quite important as well. Okay, so this is a question I get a lot. How many cases should I actually do? 那到底要做就是多少个 case 才会准备的足够充分？那这些是根据19年和20年收集的一些数据，然后成功的这种候选人他们的 case 准备的这个时间是这样子分配的。So the average total time spent as either the interviewer or the interviewee was 38 hours. So that is an average of 38 cases that the average successful candidate does. It usually takes 1 hour to do one case, just because you do the case and then you also have the feedback component as well. So the average number of cases done as the interviewee was a bit more than that delivered as the interviewer, just because usually when you're prepping for cases, you're doing it with peers or people who are also going through the process. So that's, I give you a case and then we switch and you give me a case, but you're also doing a lot of case prep with upper years or industry professionals. And so that's why as the interviewee, you're doing a lot more cases. So for me personally, I did 51 cases in total. So this is different depending on your own situation. Some people, they only need to do 20 cases in order to be very comfortable, but there's also people that I know who did over 80 cases or even 100 cases as well, in order to get those repetitions in and to be very comfortable. Okay, so what do interviewers look for, or what do firms look for in a candidate? 那就是确保这个 offer 的第一步其实是要得到第一轮的这个面试机会，这个是蛮重要的。那如果没有得到第一轮的这个面试机会，基本上就没有可能。所以呢，一般来说，公司他们都会用下面的这3个维度来评估，就是候选人。那是 GPA, professional experience, and then extracurriculars 或者是课外的活动。So for GPA, most firms, they look at 3.8 to kind of 4.0 is the sweet spot for people who are looking to go into consulting in terms of GPA. But if you have a lower GPA and you're strong on professional experience and extracurriculars, usually that's totally fine as well. So I would say out of these 3 things, if 2 of them are strong for you, then the other one can be a bit weaker and you'll be fine as well. So for professional experience, firms, they look for strong professional work experience. So summer internships or co-ops. And they don't necessarily have to be like typical business internships, as long as the experiences are rich and you can have a lot of takeaways to talk about during the interview. And then for extracurriculars, this is assessing your leadership skills and understanding your interests aside from school. So extracurriculars that are unrelated to business are also really good because it shows that you're well-rounded and you have passions outside of recruiting for consulting. Okay, so this is the structure of the interviews. So like I said, there's first rounds and second rounds. And they typically each consist of a mix of behaviorals and cases. So for example, if we're just looking at MBB firms, BCG and McKinsey for first rounds, they're pretty similar in that they have 2 interviews, each 45 minutes. And that 45 minutes consists of 15 minutes of behaviorals, 行为面试, and 30 minutes of the case interview. For Bain, they operate a bit differently, where first rounds, they don't really do behaviorals that much, and they just focus on 2 interviews of the 30-minute case. So in this first round interview, the aim is to assess the question, can you do the job? They just want to see if you meet the standard for your structure, for your analysis, for your math. And so they're a lot more structured than second round interviews and are conducted by consultants who have been at the firm for around 2 years. So pretty new themselves as well. And then moving into the second round, the question then becomes, do I want you on my team? Because you will be working with these people for a long time going forward and basically every day. So they really want to actually like you and see if you're good to work with. So they're less structured than the first round interviews, and they're conducted by partners or principals of the company. So people with a bit more experience and are higher on kind of the leadership or the career path at the firm. So for BCG and McKinsey, it's pretty similar to the format of first rounds, where it's 2 interviews, each 45 minutes. So behaviorals and case. But then for Bain, It's usually 3 interviews, each 40 minutes, and you have 1 behavioral interview and then 2 case interviews. Okay, so these are helpful case resources that I also found really helpful when I was prepping for cases. So first of all is Casebooks. So Case in Point is really good because it has introduction to exactly how case interviews work, as well as some mock cases as well. And then when you actually do mock cases, the best consulting casebooks are from different consulting clubs. So Kellogg's, UMich, Duke, London School of Economics, Darden, and Wharton. And there's a lot more out there. For me personally, I found the Kellogg casebook really good and really similar to what you can expect in an actual case interview. And then you also have interactive platforms and recordings. So Prepped. Prepped is a website where you can do different drills. So they segment it into structuring, qualitative, exhibits, and then quantitative, and also ideation. And I found this really helpful for practicing and drilling in on specific areas that you need to improve on. And there's also Victor Chang's audio recordings of his Look Over My Shoulder program, where he actually takes you through a live case and comments on different sections of what the candidate did well or what they could improve on. So this is also very helpful at the start when you don't really know what a case really looks like. And then Rocket Blocks is another program that is really good for finding case buddies to do case prep with. And for podcasts or news stuff that you can listen to, there's general news things like The Daily by the New York Times, World at 6 by CBC, and there's also market news for that you can get through Snacks Daily podcast, and they also do, I think, an email newsletter as well. And for the economics or the news on the economy, there's Planet Money, Freakonomics Radio, and other resources include Revisionist History, and also Harvard Business Review IdeaCast is another good podcast to listen to. Okay, so these are kind of the best practices for virtual interviews or virtual kind of recruiting. So a lot of the times, I think, even though some firms are going back in person, a lot of interviews are still going to be conducted virtually during the summer. So for coffee chats, the best practice is phone calls are usually the preferred medium when reaching out to people who you're not too familiar with. But if you are familiar with the person or their alumni, or you know someone who knows them who can connect you to them, Zoom chats will work well for these warm contacts. And always offer to send a calendar invite to kind of lock in the date and time. These people are really busy, so you definitely want to send them a reminder and keep the chats 20 to 30 minutes long for these industry contacts. And then always come prepared with your questions. And then for the interviews, always test your equipment, especially your audio beforehand. Dress professionally, like as if you were going to in-person interviews. And then good room, good lighting, and space to work with is also very important. And use a lot of gestures to appear more engaged. Because it is hard throughout virtual interviews, and you have to use very clear and explicit communication in order to get your point across clearly as possible. And also really practice using Zoom, which most companies use during their interviews. Okay, so that's the kind of general recruiting overview for consulting. Now let's look at how exactly does a case interview work. So this is a typical case interview flow, and you have 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning for the intro and also the fit or behavioral interview. And the bulk of the case or the bulk of the interview is going to be that case. So depending on how fast you get through it, it's 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes even a bit longer. And the final 5 minutes is the Q&A session with your interviewer. So looking into the case interview, you have 5 main components to it. The first is the problem introduction. So this is when the interviewer will give you your prompt and tell you exactly what they need out of this case. And then is the structuring component. Next is gathering information and doing analysis and insights. So oftentimes you'll be given not all of the information at the start. So it's going to be a process of gathering information, conducting those analysis and insights, and then gathering more information and doing more analysis and insights until you have enough analysis and insights to offer a solid recommendation and then ultimately conclude the case. And throughout this whole process, you're really looking at ongoing two-way communication with your interviewer. So you really want to engage them and talk them through the entire process. So the skills that are assessed in this entire process is communication, creativity, critical thinking, business logic and intuition, and also problem solving and teamwork. So teamwork in the sense of how well are you able to work with your interviewer in asking the right questions and solving the problem or pivoting when you get stuck on something. So now diving deeper into what each section looks like, there's the problem introduction. So this is when you receive your case prompt, which is a lot shorter sometimes than you would expect. Sometimes it only takes a few sentences, or sometimes they read out an entire paragraph to you. And some of the information is very important, but sometimes there's a lot of filler information as well that isn't really essential to the case. So really listen carefully and note down just the key points. Because you won't have time to write everything down. And then afterwards, you will have to kind of summarize what exactly the case is about back to your interviewer, but don't simply repeat the information, just synthesize or summarize the main points. And make sure that you get the facts and objective correct. So ask clarifying questions to your interviewer and make sure you understand exactly what the case is about and what you're trying to solve. So for example, if the interviewer says the objective is to be the market leader in 5 years' time, clarify what that means. Is it 20% market share or is it 20 million in revenues? What is the client really interested in? And also be very punchy and confident in this section, because this is where you set the tone for the entire case interview. So be sharp and concise and don't ramble on, and make sure that you're just asking the most essential questions and summarizing the most essential information. Next is the structure. So after you know what the case is about, you will take kind of 1 to 2 minutes to say, is it okay if I take a minute to structure out my thoughts and draw out how you're going to approach this case? So your structure components is 2 levels. It's going to be, first of all, your broad buckets, and then all the subpoints or your sub buckets under your broad buckets. So draw out a tree or use bullet points for this. I personally like using bullet points, but drawing out a tree is also a good idea. That works for some people as well. And B, Mises. So this is something that you've probably heard if you've read through any sort of consulting guides. It's be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. So what that means is, for mutually exclusive, 你的所有的 broad buckets 不要有就是重叠或者重复的一些信息。然后 collectively exhaustive 就是所有的问题该讲到的你都已经 include 在你的这个 framework 里面，没有漏掉哪方面的影响，就是整个结构的一些东西。So that's what it means by being Mises. And obviously, if it was in person, you would turn your paper around to show your structure to the interviewer. But since it's virtual interviews, a lot of the times you have to clearly communicate every step. So one way to do that is to go from general to specific and to always signpost. So what signposting means is numbering your points and your subpoints. So for example, you would say, I want to look at 3 different things, 1, 2, and 3. And then for number 1, I want to look at 4 more things. Number 1 is this, number 2 is this, number 3 is this, and lastly, number 4 is this. So numbering that makes it very organized and is a good practice to do. And obviously don't force fit any frameworks. You always want to be flexible in subtracting certain things from your kind of pre-thought out framework, but also adding certain things as well that you may not have thought about beforehand. And then the deep dive is when you actually go into the different components of the case. So throughout this, you want to refer to your structure throughout your analysis. So always go back to your structure and say, okay, so now we're looking at this component, and prioritize your thoughts by forming a hypothesis. So what do you think may be causing the issue, or what is the root issue? So use information provided and also any clues from the interviewer to determine what your hypothesis is. And then sometimes you won't have enough information to form that hypothesis. So don't be pressured to form one if you don't have enough data. And what you're basically wanting to do is narrow it down to what the root issue is, and then check and cross out sections of your framework as you go. So always use the 80-20 rule when you're trying to use 20% of the effort to achieve 80% of the impact. And then be flexible in your initial structure, because what you initially have may not always work and you might have to change it around a bit. Okay, and then the analysis and insights is a lot of the times the math component or the exhibits of what you're trying to analyze. So always use a separate piece of paper for each piece of analysis. And lay out your math approach and equation first. So don't just jump into the numbers right away. And always run your approach, run it by your interviewer first, so that you know that you're on the right track. And practice your mental math, obviously, and practice doing public math. So talking through the math and talking it through when someone is watching you do mental math, because that can be quite stressful and some people get brain freeze whenever they do this. And also try and think of more creative solutions when you're doing your analysis. So think outside the box and bring up points that you think are creative, even if they might not be totally feasible. You should still bring it up, but just state that you have to look into the feasibility of it. And the most important thing is to do your first, second, third level insights in your analysis. So your first level insight is what is the answer that you got to? But you want to go further into your second level insights, the so what. So why does this matter? What does this information tell you? Why should you care? And then the third level insight is now what? So given this information, what is our next step? What should we do now? How does this compare with competitors? So you really want to go more in depth in your analysis. And for market sizing questions, it's also helpful to touch up on common statistics. So for example, if they give you a question like, how many light bulbs are sold in Canada each year, you would want to know what the rough population of Canada is. So touching up on those kind of big stats is also a good idea as well. And then finally, your recommendation and conclusion is after you think you have enough information to give a recommendation, or sometimes your interviewer will say, the CEO is walking in, can you give him or her a summary or recap of everything that we've talked about? So always take a moment to prepare your thoughts. And you want to end with a clear recommendation. So go back to your pieces of analysis and synthesize the main conclusions for each one. And then be prepared for the elevator test. So what that means is you bump into the CEO in an elevator. You only have 30 seconds to 1 minute. So you want to be very concise. Always keep it within 1 minute. And you want to provide the answer to the question, answer first. So state what your recommendation is, and then go into the reasoning behind it. So it's short and to the point, and please don't repeat everything again, just the main points. And of course, you also always want to consider the implementation risks and how you're going to mitigate these risks, as well as the next steps going forward as well. Okay. So that is how a typical case interview works. And so now for kind of next steps, and then we can end it off with any questions that anyone has. 那就是下一步，首先就是浏览或者是读不同的一些这种咨询指南，就比如说 Case in Point 是一个很好的资源，然后呢可以帮助你就是更好的了解这个 Case Prep 的整个过程，然后同时也开始跟一些过来人或者是业内的这个人士开始 network， 然后了解他们的这个经验，然后开始建立就是 connection。这些都会跟你以后去这些公司面试都会有很大的帮助。还有就是开始做模拟的 case， 就你越快开始做，你就可以越就是快提升。然后还有就是欢迎大家把一些问题可以发到我们的这个微信群里面，然后我和大家都可以帮忙解答。然后还有可以参加下面的一些讲座，因为我会尽力分享就有用的一些经验和信息，针对一些更 specific 或是具体的一些部分，比如说case interview， 还有networking， 还有就是 behavioral 的一些 prep。然后很多信息也会发在小红书，所以呢也可以关注这个小红书的这个号。然后for English speakers or for people who don't use WeChat that much, you can also contact me through Instagram as well. So that's it for next steps and for today's kind of session on the case interviews. So now we'll open the floor to any questions. You can also send it in the chat as well. And I'll try my best to answer them.